My name is Ruth Matthews, and I'm 74 years old. I've spent the majority of my life as a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. I dedicated everything to my family, especially my husband, Thomas. We had been married for 50 years, and I thought I knew everything there was to know about him. The love we shared was unshakable, or so I believed. But everything I thought I knew was shattered the day I discovered the truth. Thomas wasn't the man I had married. In fact, he wasn't the man I had spent my life with at all. It started innocently enough, just a few strange signs, little things that didn't add up. A late-night phone call here, an unexplained trip there. I thought I was just being paranoid, but deep down, something felt wrong. Then came the night that would change everything. Thomas came home late, his face flushed with anger. The man I had known for so long was suddenly a stranger to me. I tried to ask him about his day, but he barely looked at me, his mind clearly elsewhere. He mumbled something about work and retreated to the bedroom, leaving me standing there in the kitchen, heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't until the next day that I found the note. Hidden in the back of the drawer, buried under a stack of old papers, was a letter. It wasn't for me. It was from a woman named Laura, and it was clear from the words that she and Thomas had been involved in a secret affair for months, maybe even longer. She called him her love, and she promised him a life free from me. The betrayal stung, deeper than anything I had ever felt. The man I had given my entire life to, the father of my children, the one person I thought I could trust above all others, had been living a double life. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came when I confronted him. Thomas didn't apologize. He didn't beg for forgiveness. Instead, he told me that he had moved on, that I was nothing more than a burden to him now. But he didn't stop there. He told me he had plans to marry Laura, and that I would be out of the picture. "You're too old, Ruth," he said coldly. "You've served your purpose." But it didn't end there. No, Thomas had a plan, a dark plan. He didn't just want me out of his life. He wanted me gone, permanently. It was then that I realized the full extent of his betrayal. He was planning to have me killed. He had made arrangements with someone, a man I didn't know, someone who had promised him that I would never be a problem again. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. My own husband was plotting my death. But what he didn't know, what he could never have imagined, was that I wasn't the helpless woman he thought I was. No, I had a secret of my own, a secret that would soon bring his world crashing down. As I stood there, holding the letter in my hands, the weight of the situation sinking in, I knew one thing: I would survive. I would outsmart him, and I would make sure that the truth came to light, no matter what it took. But the question was, how? I didn't tell anyone what I had discovered. Not my children, not my friends, and certainly not Thomas. I had to keep up the charade, play the role of the devoted wife while I carefully planned my next move. I knew that if I acted too quickly, I might give Thomas the opportunity to do something irreversible. No, I needed to be patient. The days following my discovery were strange. Thomas went about his routine as though nothing had changed, but I could feel the tension in the air. He was watching me more closely now, suspicious of every movement I made. I knew that he suspected I knew something, but he didn't know just how much I knew. I began to watch him just as carefully, trying to find any clue that would help me understand what he was really planning. One evening, after he had left the house to meet with Laura, I went through his things. I wasn't proud of it, but I had no other choice. I needed to know more. I went straight to the drawer where he kept his personal items. There, hidden beneath a stack of old receipts and papers, I found a set of keys to a lockbox. My heart raced. I didn't know what was inside, but I knew it was important. The lockbox was hidden in the attic, behind an old trunk that hadn't been touched in years. I made my way up there quietly, heart pounding in my chest. I opened the box with trembling hands and found a set of documents that would change everything. They were insurance papers, but they weren't just for life insurance. They were for a policy worth over $1 million, and the beneficiary wasn't me. It was Laura. My mind spun as I put the pieces together. Thomas had been planning this for a while. He had taken out an insurance policy on me, and he had made Laura the sole beneficiary. It was all starting to make sense. He wasn't just trying to get rid of me emotionally. He was trying to kill me and make a fortune off of it. I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized how close I had come to being the victim of his plan. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew this couldn't be a coincidence. He had been planning this for months, and he thought I was too naive to figure it out. But now I had the upper hand. I had the proof, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. But as I stood there in the attic, my hands shaking, a cold dread washed over me. What if he found out? What if he realized that I knew everything? I couldn't afford to make a mistake. The stakes were too high. But what I didn't know was that my discovery would set off a chain of events that would change everything. The next few days were a blur. I kept my distance from Thomas, pretending everything was normal while I meticulously worked on my plan. I knew I couldn't go to the police just yet. If I did, Thomas would have time to cover his tracks, or even flee with Laura. No, I had to wait for the right moment. I had to make sure that when the truth came out, there would be no way for them to escape it. I spent my days gathering every shred of evidence I could find. More insurance policies, secret messages, and even photographs of Thomas and Laura together. Each piece brought me closer to the truth, but it wasn't enough yet. I needed something that would break them, something that would force them to face the consequences of their actions. One afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Robert, the lawyer I had been consulting in secret. "Ruth, I've got something for you," he said, his voice urgent. "You won't believe it." He had managed to track down the man who Thomas had hired to kill me. His name was Paul, and he had a criminal record a mile long. Robert had arranged a meeting with him, and Paul was willing to talk. But there was a catch. Paul wouldn't give up the details of the plot without a little push. He wanted money that Robert didn't have. But I wasn't concerned about money. I had a different approach in mind. I decided to visit Paul myself. I knew that the best way to get the truth was face to face. I wasn't afraid of him. In fact, I believed he could help me take Thomas down. I went to the dingy part of town where Paul lived, a rundown apartment in a building that looked like it might fall down any minute. When I knocked on the door, he answered quickly, as if he had been waiting for me. "Ruth Matthews," he said with a sneer. "I know who you are. What do you want from me?" "I want the truth," I replied, my voice steady. "I want to know everything about your deal with my husband." Paul hesitated for a moment, but then, to my surprise, he let me inside. He wasn't the kind of man I imagined. He wasn't some cold-blooded killer, but rather a man who had made a series of poor choices that had led him down a dangerous path. He wasn't going to get away with it. Not while I was still breathing. I sat across from him, my gaze never leaving his eyes. "Tell me everything, Paul. I know Thomas is paying you to kill me. I just need to know when and how." The words left his mouth in a rush, as if the weight of the confession was too much for him to bear. He described how Thomas had approached him months ago, offering him a large sum of money to take care of me. But what was worse, Thomas had been adamant about it. He didn't want it to be a quick death. He wanted me to suffer. "Your husband is cold, Ruth," Paul said, his voice shaking with the guilt of his involvement. "He wanted you to feel pain. He wanted to watch it all unfold slowly." I sat there, shocked, but a small part of me knew that this was the confirmation I needed. The man I had loved had planned my death, and worse still, he had wanted me to suffer. But then, Paul leaned in closer, his voice lowering to a whisper. "But Ruth, there's one thing you don't know. It wasn't just about the money for him. He was after something else, something much bigger than that. He didn't just want to kill you. He wanted to destroy you, completely." I felt a chill run through me as I listened to Paul's words. Thomas hadn't just been plotting my death for money. He was trying to erase me from existence, to strip me of everything I was, and leave me with nothing but the shadows of my former life. "What do you mean, destroy me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't say too much," Paul replied nervously. "But there's a will, Ruth. Thomas altered your will, made sure you would have nothing after he took you out of the picture. He wanted to make sure Laura would inherit everything, the house, the money, the business. Everything. But he didn't stop there. He planned to take everything from you, even your children." It was a bombshell. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Thomas had not only planned my death, but he had also planned to take my legacy away, to leave me without even the things that mattered most: my family, my home, my life's work. I felt a burning rage inside me. How could he have done this to me? How could he have planned such a thing? But I knew what I had to do. I had to expose him. I had to take this information and make sure that the truth came to light. He couldn't get away with it. Not now, not ever. As I left Paul's apartment, I felt a sense of resolve settle over me. I was going to do whatever it took to stop Thomas and Laura. I wasn't going to let them win. But as I walked back to my car, I heard a noise behind me. I spun around, heart racing. And there, in the shadows, was Thomas. He had been watching me the whole time. My heart skipped a beat as I saw Thomas standing in the shadows, his eyes narrowed, his face a mask of cold fury. He had been following me, watching my every move. I could feel my pulse racing as the weight of the situation hit me all over again. This was no longer just a game of wills. It was a fight for my life, and Thomas was determined to win. "You really thought you could outsmart me, Ruth?" Thomas's voice was low, dangerous. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "You think you can play detective and expose me? You're nothing without me. I made you, and I'll destroy you." The word stung, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to show weakness. "Not now." "I'm not the same woman you married," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. "You can't control me anymore, Thomas. I've already uncovered everything you've done behind my back, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth." His expression twisted into a snarl. "You think anyone will believe you? You think the police will just take your word over mine? You're delusional, Ruth. You've always been weak, and that's why I've been able to get away with it." I could feel the tension in the air, the silence thick with the weight of his threats. But I wasn't afraid anymore. If anything, I was angrier than I had ever been in my life. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about survival. "You're right about one thing," I said, taking a step forward, my voice cold with determination. "I've been weak, but not anymore. I've learned too much, and now you're going to pay for what you've done." For a moment, Thomas didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at me as if trying to figure out what my next move would be. But I had already made up my mind. This was the end of his reign of control over me. "I've already spoken to the police," I continued, watching his reaction closely. "I've got everything I need to bring you down. You and Laura both. You think you can keep me in the dark, but I'm done being the victim. And now the truth is going to destroy everything you've built." Thomas's eyes widened in shock, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his gaze. It was fleeting, but it was there. He had underestimated me. And now, he was starting to realize that I wasn't the helpless, old woman he thought I was. "Don't you dare think you can get away with this," I added, my voice icy. "You may have had control over me for years, but not anymore. I'm going to expose you. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you've done." He took a step back, shaking his head. "You don't understand. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, Ruth. I will ruin you. I'll make sure you never see your children again. I'll make sure your name is destroyed. You have no idea the lengths I'm willing to go to." I didn't flinch. "Do your worst, Thomas. I'm ready." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. But even as I left, I knew the danger wasn't over. Thomas wasn't going to give up easily. He was desperate, and when people like him get desperate, they're capable of anything. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't safe yet. I had to act fast. The police had my evidence, but I needed to make sure they had everything they needed to take him down for good. I needed to outsmart him before he had a chance to retaliate. But I had no idea how far he was willing to go to protect his secrets. Later that night, as I sat in the living room, my mind racing with plans and contingencies, the phone rang. My heart leapt in my chest, and I rushed to answer it. "Ruth." Robert's voice came through, strained and urgent. "You need to listen to me. There's something I didn't know before. Thomas didn't just alter your will. He's been hiding something even bigger. Something that could ruin everything. What do you mean? I asked, my pulse quickening. I've been digging deeper, Robert continued, and I've found evidence that Thomas has been involved in other illegal activities, money laundering, fraud. It's bigger than just the will and the affair. And the worst part? Laura's been a part of it all. I felt a chill run down my spine. I had known that Thomas was hiding things, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. Where is it? I asked, my voice tight with urgency. Where is the proof? I'll send it over, but Ruth, this is dangerous. If Thomas finds out we've uncovered this, he won't hesitate to go after you. I'll take the risk, I said, determination flooding my veins. I'm not backing down now. Just as I hung up, I heard a noise from outside. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat. Was it Thomas? Or had he sent someone to silence me? I crept to the window, my breath shallow, as I peered out into the dark night. The figure that stepped out of the car was familiar, but it wasn't Thomas. It was Laura. My heart raced as I watched Laura step out of the car, her movements deliberate and calm. She wasn't the type to show emotion, and that only made her presence more unsettling. I watched her as she walked up to my front door, her heels clicking against the pavement with every step, each sound echoing in the silence of the night. I didn't know what she wanted, but I had a sinking feeling it wasn't good. I had known her as the woman who had torn my life apart, the woman who had replaced me in my husband's heart. But this, seeing her standing there so close to my home, made something inside me snap. I wasn't going to sit back and let her destroy everything any longer. I quickly moved through the house, staying low to avoid being seen. I didn't want her to know I was watching her. My mind was racing with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Was she here to threaten me? Or was this her final attempt to push me out of the way for good? Whatever the reason, I wasn't about to let her have the upper hand. I watched from behind the curtains as she knocked on the door, her face hidden by the shadows of the night. I waited, feeling the seconds tick by like hours. Finally, the door creaked open, and Thomas appeared, his face a mixture of frustration and confusion. "Laura," he said, his voice sharp. "What are you doing here?" Laura didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped past him into the house, her eyes scanning the room as if she were looking for something or someone. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice low but filled with authority. "We need to end this, Thomas. It's getting out of hand." "End what?" Thomas asked, his tone defensive. "We're already in this, Laura. There's no going back." "I'm talking about Ruth," she said, her words laced with venom. "She's not just a nuisance anymore. She's a problem. And if she keeps digging into our lives, if she keeps pushing us, it'll all fall apart. Do you really think we can afford that?" A chill ran down my spine. I had known that Laura didn't like me, but this was something else. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to catch every word. "I don't care what she does," Thomas responded, his voice full of anger. "She's old, Ruth. She's not a threat anymore. I'll deal with her. You don't have to worry." But Laura wasn't so easily convinced. "Deal with her," she hissed. "Are you serious? You're not even capable of handling her anymore. We need to end this now. We can't let her keep breathing down our necks. We have to make sure she's gone, once and for all." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just about a man cheating on his wife anymore. This was about a conspiracy, a dark plan that involved betrayal and murder. They wanted to end my life, erase me from existence. And they were going to do whatever it took to make it happen. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I couldn't confront them now. Not yet. But I knew what I had to do next. I had to be careful, I had to be smart, and most importantly, I had to be prepared. I quietly backed away from the door and moved to my phone. Robert had promised to send over the evidence, proof that would expose everything. But the clock was ticking. I needed that proof, and I needed it fast. Just as I reached for my phone, the front door slammed open. I jumped, heart racing. Thomas's voice cut through the silence, loud and angry. "You think you're going to get away with this, Ruth?" His words were filled with fury. "You have no idea what you've started. If you want to keep digging, go ahead. But I swear to God, Ruth, you'll regret it. I didn't even flinch. This was it. The confrontation I had been dreading. I had to stand my ground, no matter the cost. I walked toward the door, my mind made up. I couldn't let him intimidate me anymore. I wasn't going to be silent, not this time. I stepped outside, meeting Thomas's gaze. His face was twisted with rage, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. You're not going to get away with it, Thomas, I said, my voice cold and steady. You're not going to get away with what you've done to me, to our family. He laughed, a bitter, cruel sound that made my blood run cold. You think anyone will believe you, Ruth? You think they'll listen to the ramblings of a woman who's old, tired, and desperate? You have nothing, and you'll never win. I stood there, my heart beating in my chest, but my resolve unshakable. I have something you'll never have, the truth, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. His face twisted with rage, and for a moment, I thought he might attack me. But instead, he just glared at me, his eyes filled with hate. You have no idea what you're dealing with, he said, his voice low and menacing. You're making a huge mistake, Ruth. And when this is over, you'll wish you never crossed me. Before I could respond, he turned and stormed back inside, slamming the door behind him. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. I had to act fast. Time was running out, and I could feel the walls closing in. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The game had just begun, and I wasn't going to let Thomas and Laura win. The days that followed felt like a ticking time bomb, each moment a step closer to the explosive truth coming to light. I had no choice but to keep my head down, stay out of sight, and gather everything I could to bring Thomas and Laura to justice. The moment they realized I was serious, the moment they understood that I had the power to destroy everything they'd worked for, I knew they would stop at nothing to silence me. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I had survived too much to let them take me down now. As I sat in my living room, the evidence spread out before me, I realized just how deep their treachery ran. I had copies of the insurance papers, the altered will, and a host of other documents that painted a damning picture. But there was still one thing left to do: turn everything over to the authorities. I couldn't do it alone, though. I needed help, and I needed to be sure that Thomas and Laura couldn't weasel their way out of this. I needed Robert, my lawyer, to make sure everything I had was solid. I wasn't going to give them an inch. They had taken so much from me already, and now I was going to take it all back. But as I prepared to call Robert, my phone rang. The number wasn't one I recognized, but I answered it anyway. "Ruth, it's Paul," the voice on the other end said. My stomach dropped. Paul was the man who had been hired by Thomas to kill me. The one I had confronted in the dark alley. The one who had given me the truth. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the unease creeping up my spine. "I've been thinking about what you said," Paul continued, his voice filled with hesitation. "I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I've already done too much, but I can't live with myself if I don't help you. I know you have the evidence. I know what Thomas is planning. I want to help you bring him down." I didn't trust him fully, not yet, but I knew this could be the break I needed. "What are you offering?" I asked, my tone cautious but hopeful. "I can get you more," he said, his voice lowering to a whisper. "There's more I know, Ruth. There's something Thomas doesn't want you to find. It's buried deep, but I can lead you to it. I'll show you where it is, but you have to act fast. Thomas is onto you, and if he finds out I'm helping you..." His voice trailed off, and the silence between us grew thick with tension. I knew I had to decide quickly. Was I going to take a chance on him, or was this just another dangerous game that Thomas was playing? "You've already put yourself at risk, Paul," I said, trying to keep my fear in check. "Why are you doing this?" "I can't keep living this way," he admitted. "I'm not a good man, Ruth, but I'm not a killer. I can't help him do this to you. Let me make it right." I paused for a moment, thinking of all the risks. It was one thing to have evidence against Thomas, but what if he had hidden something more, something that could be the final nail in his coffin? And what if Paul was just trying to play both sides? But I had no choice. I couldn't back down now. "Okay, I said, my voice firm. Tell me where to go. The line went quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear Paul gathering his courage. Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th and Elm. Midnight. Come alone. I didn't like the idea of going alone, but I had no other choice. This was my shot. I was running out of time, and I knew Thomas was getting closer to figuring out that I had uncovered everything. When midnight came, I found myself standing outside the warehouse, the cool night air biting at my skin. The street was empty, the only sound the distant hum of traffic. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I approached the large, rusted door. The warehouse had been abandoned for years, but tonight it was the place that would decide my fate. I stepped inside, my breath echoing in the empty space. The shadows seemed to stretch on forever, and I could barely make out the outline of Paul standing near the back. As I walked toward him, I noticed his nervous energy. He looked like a man who had been through too much and was on the verge of breaking. I'm here, I said, my voice steady despite the fear threatening to take over. What did you find? Paul handed me a manila folder, its edges worn with age. This is it, the final piece of the puzzle. I took the folder from him, my hands trembling slightly. The folder contained more documents that could finally destroy Thomas once and for all. As I flipped through them, I found something that made my blood run cold. It wasn't just about the will or the life insurance policy. It was something worse. Much worse. Thomas had been involved in a large-scale fraud scheme, using my name and our family business to launder money. The money wasn't just going into Laura's pockets, as I had suspected. It was being funneled to an underground network of criminals. People far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. I looked up at Paul, my heart pounding. This is bigger than I thought. If this gets out, Thomas and Laura will be facing more than just a murder charge. They'll be looking at federal prison. Paul nodded, his face grim. I didn't want to get involved, Ruth. But now you have the power. You can take them down. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke through the silence. Footsteps, coming from the back of the warehouse. My heart skipped. Someone was approaching. I turned to Paul. You didn't tell anyone, did you? Before he could answer, the door slammed open. And there, standing in the doorway, was Thomas. For a split second, everything stood still. The sound of the door slamming open echoed in the cold, empty warehouse as Thomas stood there, glaring at me, his eyes burning with anger and something darker, something more dangerous. So, this is where you've been hiding, he sneered, stepping into the dimly lit space. His voice was filled with venom. Did you really think you could go behind my back and get away with it, Ruth? Did you think you could just expose me without consequences? I stood frozen, the folder clutched tightly in my hands. I knew this was coming. I'd prepared myself for it, but nothing could have truly prepared me for the look on his face, the betrayal, the disgust, the twisted satisfaction in his eyes. You've made a big mistake, Thomas said, his voice low and controlled. I warned you, Ruth. I told you to stay out of it. But now you're making things much worse for yourself. Behind me, I heard Paul shift uncomfortably. His presence was tense, as if he was calculating his next move. He seemed as if he were about to speak, but before he could, Thomas raised his hand, cutting him off. Stay out of this, Paul, Thomas growled, his gaze never leaving me. This is between me and my wife. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. The calmness in his voice was unnerving. It was as though he was trying to project control over the situation, to make me believe that he still held all the power. But I wasn't the same woman he had once known. I had spent too many years being silent, too many years bending to his will. Not anymore. I'm not your wife anymore, Thomas, I said firmly, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. I'm done being your victim. He chuckled, but it was bitter, mocking. You've never been my victim, Ruth. You've always been a pawn in my game. But you're right about one thing. You're not my wife anymore. You're just a problem that needs to be dealt with. I felt a chill run through me. He wasn't just threatening me with words anymore. He meant it. He was going to finish what he started one way or another. But this time, I wasn't going to let him. You don't scare me anymore, Thomas, I said, walking toward him with as much confidence as I could muster. I've got everything I need to bring you down. You and Laura. The money laundering, the insurance fraud, the murder plot, you're finished. You're not getting away with it. His eyes flickered with something. Fear, maybe? But it was gone before I could fully register it. His expression twisted into a sneer, and he took a step closer to me. You think the police will believe you? He spat. You think anyone will take your word over mine? You're just an old woman trying to stay relevant. You'll be the one who's locked up when this is all over. I'll make sure of it. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I knew the stakes were higher than ever now. But I wasn't going to let him manipulate me. Not this time. Maybe, I said, my voice quiet but resolute. But I've already sent everything to the police. They'll be here any minute. For a moment, Thomas froze. His eyes widened, and I could see the fear in them now. He hadn't expected me to be this far ahead, to have already outmaneuvered him. But he quickly recovered, his anger bubbling over. Lies, he roared. You think I'm scared of a few documents? You think I can't destroy them? You're nothing. You always have been. But before I could respond, a loud crash from the other side of the warehouse broke through the tension. The sound of heavy footsteps. Someone was coming. Thomas, you've lost, I said, standing my ground. This ends tonight. You're not in control anymore. Just then, the door to the warehouse flew open once more. 2 uniformed officers stormed inside, guns drawn, their expressions stern. Get on the ground. Now, one of them shouted. Thomas went pale, his entire demeanor crumbling as he realized it was over. The police were here, just like I had planned. For a moment, there was chaos. Thomas stood frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Paul, looking equally shocked, backed away slowly, his hands raised in surrender. He wasn't sure if he'd just walked into something he couldn't escape from. But I wasn't worried about him. Not anymore. This was my moment. The officers moved quickly, securing Thomas, placing him in handcuffs. One of them turned to me. Are you Ruth Matthews? He asked, his tone softer now that Thomas was no longer a threat. I nodded, my throat dry. Yes, I'm Ruth. We've got everything we need. You're safe now, the officer said, his voice reassuring. Thank you for your patience. You did the right thing. Thomas and his accomplice, Laura, are going to be facing serious charges. I felt a weight lift off my chest, but it wasn't over yet. There was still the matter of Laura, still the matter of the life I had lost. But for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. I could stand tall and face the future without fear. As the officers took Thomas away, I turned to Paul. He looked exhausted, his face pale. But there was something else there. Too, a sense of relief. Maybe? Or guilt. You did the right thing, I said softly. You helped me take him down. Paul nodded but didn't say anything. He seemed like a man caught in the middle of something he didn't fully understand, something that had spiraled far beyond what he had bargained for. But I had what I needed. The evidence was out there. The truth was finally exposed. But as I watched Thomas being driven away, a thought lingered in my mind. The last thing he had said to me echoed in my head. You're nothing. You always have been. Well, maybe I had been nothing in his eyes. But not anymore. Tonight, I had reclaimed everything he had tried to take from me. And I was going to make sure he never hurt anyone else again. The days that followed Thomas's arrest were a blur. The weight of everything that had happened, everything I had uncovered, was beginning to sink in. There were moments when I thought I could breathe again, moments when I felt like I might finally have my life back. But the truth was, I wasn't sure what that life would look like anymore. I had spent so many years being nothing but a shadow in Thomas's world, that now I didn't know who I was without him. Without the life we had built together, or rather, the life I thought we had built. The police had done their job, and Thomas was now behind bars. He was facing charges for conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and the attempted murder of me. Laura, too, had been arrested. She had been just as deeply involved in the fraud as Thomas, and now both of them were facing a lengthy trial. But even though the wheels of justice were finally turning, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to this story. More I hadn't yet uncovered. I had spent decades raising our children, managing the household, and supporting Thomas through thick and thin. Now all of that was gone. The business, the house, the life we had shared, they were no longer mine. Everything was tied up in legal battles, and I knew it would take years before I would see any of it again. As I sat alone in my living room, staring at the quiet emptiness around me, I began to feel a sense of isolation. I had won, yes, but at what cost? Everything had changed so drastically in such a short period of time. There was no going back. The doorbell rang, breaking me out of my thoughts. I hesitated for a moment before getting up to answer it. Who could it be at this hour? When I opened the door, I was surprised to see my son, Daniel, standing there. His face was grim, his eyes red-rimmed, as if he had been crying. "Mom," he said softly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." I closed the door behind him, my heart heavy with the weight of what he might have to say. Daniel had always been the sensitive one, the one who saw through the cracks in our family and asked the hard questions. And now he had something on his mind that he needed to get off his chest. About what? I asked, trying to steady my breath. About everything that's happened? He nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor. Yeah. But more importantly, about Thomas. About how I found out everything. I didn't know, Mom. I didn't know he was capable of all of this. I swallowed hard, the bitterness of the betrayal still fresh in my mouth. You think I didn't know either? I said, my voice sharp. You think I wasn't blindsided by all of this? Your father wasn't just some man who cheated. He was planning to destroy me. And worse, he had Laura involved in everything. Do you think I didn't know? That I didn't feel it all coming, even when I pretended to turn a blind eye? Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean it like that, he said, his voice breaking. I can't believe he was capable of such cruelty. The way he treated you, the way he treated us. It makes me sick to my stomach. My heart softened, and I placed a hand on his shoulder. I know, Daniel. I know. But we can't change what's been done. We can only move forward. And right now, that means focusing on getting through this. We have to stay strong. For ourselves. For the family. I know, he whispered, looking up at me. But there's something else. I need to ask you something. Something I've been thinking about ever since all of this came out. What is it? I asked, already dreading what he might say. He hesitated, biting his lip before he spoke. I know you're not going to like this, but I need to know the truth. Mom, is it true that you were going to leave him? Even before all this came out? Before you found the letter? Before the affair was exposed? The question hit me like a slap in the face. My son knew something. He had seen the cracks in our marriage long before I had ever admitted them to myself. And now, he was asking me the one question I had tried to bury. I didn't know how to answer him. Part of me wanted to deny it, to tell him that it wasn't true. But the truth was, it was true. I had thought about leaving Thomas many times. I had considered what my life would be like without him, without the burden of living in his shadow. I don't know, Daniel, I said softly. I don't know if I could have left him. I wanted to so badly, but I didn't know how. I was trapped in this life, in this role. And when I found out about the affair, it was like everything finally broke. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't be the woman who accepted betrayal. Not anymore. He nodded, a look of understanding on his face. I get it. I wanted to know that you were thinking about yourself too. You always put us first. But you deserve more than just surviving, Mom. You deserve to live. His words hit me hard, harder than I was willing to admit. I had spent so many years living for everyone else that I had forgotten what it meant to live for myself. To take back the life I had lost, the life Thomas had stolen from me. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about revenge or justice anymore. It was about me finding myself again, about reclaiming my power. Thomas had taken so much from me, but the one thing he couldn't take was my will to survive. I will live, Daniel, I said, my voice stronger now. I will live for me. and I'm going to rebuild my life. This is just the beginning." As I said those words, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. I was fighting for my future. But as I stood there, looking at my son, I felt a strange sense of dread. This was just the beginning, and I knew, deep down, that there was more to this story than I had yet uncovered. More danger, more lies, more secrets waiting to be exposed. The days that followed my conversation with Daniel were both unsettling and empowering. For the first time in a long while, I had a sense of direction. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was taking control. But with that control came a new kind of weight, one that settled in my chest with every decision I made. I spent the next few days reaching out to the police, checking in on the progress of the case against Thomas and Laura. The evidence I had gathered was crucial, but I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be smooth. There would be hurdles, delays, and moments when I wondered if it had all been worth it. But I was determined to see this through. I wasn't just fighting for revenge. I was fighting for my future, for the life I had been denied for so long. One afternoon, as I sat in my study going over legal documents, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something in my gut told me it was important. I answered it without hesitation. "Ruth Matthews?" the voice on the other end asked. "This is Detective Harris. I'm calling about your husband's case. We've found something you need to see." My heart skipped a beat. I had expected updates, but this felt different. Something in his voice told me that this was more than just routine. "What is it?" I asked, my voice tight with anxiety. "It's about the money laundering operation," he continued, his tone serious. "We've discovered something that links Thomas and Laura to a much larger network. We're talking international scale. And there's more. We've found evidence of people who may have been involved in his plans to have you killed." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I had always known Thomas's actions were dangerous, but this was far beyond what I had imagined. "Are you telling me they were working with criminals?" I asked, my mind racing. "What do you mean by larger network?" "There are connections to money laundering schemes, fraudulent businesses, and even arms dealing," Detective Harris explained. "And we believe that Thomas and Laura were using your family's business as a front to fund these illegal operations. We're still piecing it all together, but it's clear now that this was never just about you and him. It's much bigger than that." The revelation hit me like a freight train. This was no longer just a personal vendetta. Thomas and Laura hadn't been playing a small-time game. They had been involved in something much darker, something that could shake the foundation of everything I had ever known. And they had dragged me and my family into it without my knowledge. "Detective," I said, my voice low, "is there anything else? What happens now?" "We're moving forward with the case, Ruth," Harris said, his voice firm. "But we need you to come in and testify. We have to get all the details on record, especially about the murder plot and your involvement. The more we know, the stronger the case will be." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. "I'll be there," I said, my resolve hardening. "I'll do whatever it takes to see this through." After I hung up, I sat there in silence, trying to process what I had just learned. Thomas and Laura had been involved in something far worse than I had ever imagined. And now, it was up to me to bring it all to light. But as I sat in my chair, staring at the papers spread out in front of me, something else nagged at the back of my mind. If they had been involved in such dangerous dealings, what had they been willing to do to cover their tracks? What lengths had they gone to make sure no one uncovered their dark secrets? The danger wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next day, I went to the police station to give my statement. Detective Harris was waiting for me, his expression grim. As I sat down across from him, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The walls in the room seemed to close in around me, and I knew that whatever came next would change everything. "We've got a few more questions for you, Ruth," Harris said, his voice serious. "About your relationship with Thomas and what he might have been hiding." "I already told you everything I know," I replied, my voice sharp. "But I'm here to help. If you have more questions, ask away." He paused, his eyes studying me closely. "There's one more thing, Ruth. We've been investigating Laura's background, and we've found something disturbing." My stomach dropped.
What now?
Before she was with Thomas, Laura was married to someone else, Harris continued. Someone who's currently in federal custody. And according to their records, Laura was involved in a lot of dangerous activities before she even met your husband. She has connections to organized crime syndicates, people who would stop at nothing to protect their interests. I stared at him, trying to process his words. My mind raced. Laura had been more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. And she hadn't just been after Thomas's money. She'd been after something bigger, something far more dangerous. What are you saying? I asked, my voice shaking. What does this mean for me? It means you're not safe, Ruth, Harris said, his expression hardening. We've been able to keep tabs on Laura, but she's connected to people who are much worse. And now that we've got this evidence, she's going to do whatever it takes to silence you. We need to put you in protective custody. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Protective custody? Was this really happening? You're not safe out there, Ruth, Harris continued. We're moving fast to get you somewhere secure. For now, we can't take any chances. Do you understand? I nodded, unable to speak. My world was unraveling. I had thought I was on the verge of freedom, of finally getting justice for everything I had endured. But now, I was trapped in a web of danger that I couldn't escape. I didn't know who to trust anymore, and I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew one thing: the fight was far from over. The decision to place me in protective custody came like a punch to the gut. I had spent so much of my life silently enduring, then fighting back in my own quiet way, but now I was being told that the battle wasn't over, that the worst was still to come. I wasn't sure what to feel. I had just exposed Thomas and Laura, and the truth had finally come to light. They had been arrested, their entire criminal enterprise laid bare. But I knew the danger wasn't over. Laura's connections were deeper than we had ever anticipated. There were people out there who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. Detective Harris was right. I wasn't safe anymore. The police escorted me to a safe house, a stark, impersonal place on the outskirts of the city. It was cold, quiet, and empty. It felt like a cage, not a sanctuary. The walls were too thin, the doors too heavy, and the weight of my own isolation began to press down on me like a vice. I was supposed to feel protected. I was supposed to feel safe. But all I felt was the quiet hum of fear, creeping its way into every thought, every corner of my mind. Daniel came to see me the next day, his face etched with concern. He didn't know the full extent of what I was dealing with. He didn't understand the true scope of the danger I was in, but he saw it in my eyes. He knew something had shifted, something had broken inside of me. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft. "I know you're scared, but you've done the right thing. The police have everything now. Thomas and Laura can't hurt you anymore." I looked at my son, the man who had always been my rock, and I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. That the threat wasn't over. That even though Thomas and Laura were behind bars, there were still shadows lingering, waiting to strike. "I'm fine, Daniel," I said, though my voice betrayed me. "I'm just taking it one day at a time." He didn't press. He never did. He stayed with me for hours, talking about anything and everything, trying to distract me from the harsh reality of the situation. But as the sun set and the hours grew later, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The silence in the safe house seemed to grow louder, the tension hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. It was that night when I heard the first noise. A soft scratching sound coming from the window. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself that it was just the wind, or perhaps an animal outside. But then it came again, louder this time. I froze, my heart racing in my chest. My breath caught in my throat as I slowly crept toward the window. I pulled back the curtain just enough to peer outside, but all I could see was darkness. My mind raced, searching for any logical explanation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I turned to the door. There was no sound, no footsteps, no knock, but I knew someone was out there. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone, but before I could dial, there was another sound. A knock at the door. A single, firm knock. I hesitated. My instinct screamed for me to stay silent, to stay hidden, but I couldn't. I had to know what was going on. I opened the door cautiously, expecting it to be one of the officers on duty, checking in. But when I opened it, my blood ran cold. Standing there in the doorway was someone I never expected to see again. It was Paul. "Ruth, we need to talk," he said, his voice low, urgent. "It's not over. You're still in danger." I stared at him, disbelief flooding my veins. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in hiding, Paul. You shouldn't be anywhere near me." "I had to come," he insisted, his eyes darting nervously. "There's something you don't know. Something I didn't tell you before. I wasn't just helping you take Thomas down. I was part of something much bigger, something far more dangerous. And now they know you've got the evidence." I felt my heart stop. "What do you mean they know?" "Who knows?" Paul stepped inside, looking around warily as though expecting someone to jump out of the shadows. He lowered his voice. "It's not just Thomas and Laura you have to worry about. There are people from his criminal connections, bigger people. People who will do anything to protect their business, their money. They've been watching you. They know you've got the files, Ruth. They'll stop at nothing to get them back." My stomach dropped. "What do I do now?" "You need to leave. Right now," he said urgently. "They're coming. And they won't stop until they've erased everything you have on them." I felt the walls closing in around me. I had thought the worst was over. I had thought I was safe. But now, standing in front of me, Paul was telling me that the real danger was just beginning. "What's the plan?" I asked, my voice trembling with fear. "We have to get you out of here. You can't stay in the safe house. It's compromised. I've arranged for a new location. But you need to trust me, Ruth. They're going to come for you, and we don't have much time." For a moment, I stood there, unsure of what to do. Every part of me screamed that I shouldn't trust Paul, that he had been a part of this whole mess from the start. But something in his eyes, something desperate, something genuine, made me pause. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "There's a place I know," he said, grabbing my arm gently but firmly. "It's the only way we can make sure they don't find you."